Welcome back to Poorly Educated Today in the News, where the country has once again looked at a full buffet of global crisis, economic pain, constitutional confusion, and celebrity nonsense and said, you know what this needs? More gasoline fumes and legal paperwork. Today we got war clocks, oil choke points, airline funerals, Supreme Court map surgery, Pope versus President drama, and enough financial panic to make your debit card hide under the couch. So grab a cup of coffee strong enough to qualify as military equipment, because America is not so much having a news cycle as it is backing a flaming pontoon boat into a fireworks tent. Segment 1. Hormuz toll booths and the world economy getting towed. We begin in the Strait of Hormuz, which is apparently no longer a waterway and is now the world's most expensive clogged bathtub drain. Operation Epic Fury started as a big military swing against Iran, and now everybody is standing around the wreckage arguing over who gets to control the faucet. Iran blocked the strait, the United States blocked Iranian ports, and now global oil is sitting offshore like a Walmart parking lot full of trucks whose drivers all lost the keys. This is what happens when geopolitics gets run like a family reunion where every uncle brought a chainsaw and nobody brought potato salad. The grounded part is simple, because when a major oil route gets disrupted, the pain does not stay over there. It walks right into your gas station wearing muddy boots. And buddy, those boots are stepping on everybody's wallet. Brent crude shooting up and bouncing around like a raccoon trapped in a vending machine means gasoline prices go wild, shipping costs go wild, and every business that depends on fuel starts sweating through its khakis. The administration says the blockade is pressure. Iran says it is resistance. Europe says please stop breaking the house. And regular people say, I just wanted to fill up my truck without applying for a small business loan. My favorite part is the diplomatic language, because they call it maritime leverage when normal folks would call it two angry neighbors parking tractors across each other's driveways. So the global economy is now depending on whether somebody in a war room remembers that oil markets are not a video game. And the punchline is, we all get to pay for the controller batteries. Segment 2. Spirit Airlines lands one final time in the gravel pit. And speaking of paying for fuel, Spirit Airlines has reportedly shut down after 30 years, which means the airline famous for charging extra if your shadow was too heavy has finally run out of runway. Spirit was built on the idea that flying should feel like being mailed somewhere in a plastic lawn chair, and somehow even that business model could not survive war-priced jet fuel. When your whole brand is, hey, we removed comfort so you could afford misery, there is not much left to cut once gas prices start acting like they own a yacht. You cannot charge passengers extra for oxygen twice, although I am sure somebody in accounting stared at the ceiling and whispered, what if we did? The grounded observation is that ultra-low-cost carriers are fragile when fuel spikes, because their customers are price-sensitive and their margins are thinner than gas station toilet paper. Now thousands of travelers are stranded, and you know some poor fella is standing at an airport gate with a backpack, a half-eaten pretzel, and a ticket that just turned into historical fiction. This is where macroeconomics stops being a chart and becomes a guy in flip-flops yelling at a departure screen. It is easy to talk about oil disruptions and private credit and bond yields, but the real economy is when Aunt Linda cannot get home from Orlando because the airline got body slammed by Hormuz. And let us be honest, Spirit going under is like the canary in the coal mine, except the canary charged you $40 to look at it and still arrived late. If fuel keeps climbing, other transportation businesses are going to start looking around like chickens who just heard somebody say Sunday dinner. Segment 3. Private credit, psychological contagion, and the economy catching feelings. From grounded airplanes, we move to private credit, which already sounds like something your cousin invented after 3 payday loans and a motivational podcast. Federal Reserve officials are now warning about psychological contagion, which is a fancy way of saying everybody might panic at the same time because rich people's spreadsheets got spooky. Private credit has grown into this giant shadow lending world, where risky companies borrow outside regular banks, and now rising rates, inflation, bankruptcies, and war uncertainty are all shaking the shelves. It is like stacking canned beans on a wobbly card table during a tornado, and then acting surprised when the green beans develop opinions. The serious part is that if investors stop seeing corporate failures as isolated accidents and start seeing them as cracks in the whole system, lending can freeze up fast. And once lending freezes, it spreads quicker than gossip at a church fish fry. A company cannot refinance, then layoffs start, then another company loses customers, then investors panic, and suddenly the economy is not a machine. It is a line of dominoes made out of unpaid invoices. The weirdest thing is the word psychological, because apparently the economy has feelings now, and those feelings are mostly sweaty. We used to say the market had fundamentals, but now it sounds like it needs a weighted blanket and a quiet room away from oil charts. So while politicians argue about who looks strong overseas, the financial system is in the background, whispering, "I do not feel so good," which is exactly what you do not want to hear from something holding your retirement account. Segment 4, the Supreme Court takes a chainsaw to the map drawer. Now, while the economy is coughing into a rag, the Supreme Court has been busy giving the Voting Rights Act the kind of haircut you only get when your cousin says he watched 2 barber videos online. In Louisiana versus Calais, the court weakened protections around racial vote dilution and made it much harder to challenge maps unless you can prove intentional discrimination. That sounds tidy until you remember politicians rarely write, "Hey, let us do racism" in the meeting notes right next to the coffee order. The ruling basically says you need proof of intent, which in modern politics is like asking a possum to sign a confession before you believe it got in the trash. The grounded part is that this could reshape how districts are drawn before the midterms, especially in states ready to redraw maps with all the subtlety of a bulldozer in a dollhouse. And you can already hear state legislators warming up their excuses. They will say it is not about race, it is about compactness, efficiency, tradition, community interests, and whatever other words fit on a legal napkin. Meanwhile, voters are standing there watching their neighborhoods get sliced into congressional lasagna and being told this is democracy with better geometry. I love when officials talk about maps like they are sacred math, because somehow the math always ends with one party getting a recliner and everybody else getting a folding chair. So now the country is fighting abroad, paying more at the pump, worrying about credit markets, and also redrawing democracy like a toddler with a Sharpie on a restaurant placemat. Segment 5, Trump, the Pope, Germany, and NATO's awkward family vacation. Now let us drift from domestic courtroom thunder to international family drama, because apparently the United States is also arguing with Germany and the Vatican at the same time. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz criticized the handling of Iran negotiations, and President Trump responded with troop withdrawal talk that sounded less like strategy and more like somebody packing up a campsite after being insulted over burnt hot dogs. Germany has been a major base for American forces for decades, so pulling thousands of troops is not like moving a lawn chair. It is like yanking the breaker box out of the garage while the freezer is full of meat. NATO already had enough stress with Russia, sanctions, and European security, and now everybody is trying to figure out whether this is force posture or geopolitical door slamming. The grounded point is that alliance management matters during a war, Because even the biggest truck gets stuck if the convoy starts arguing over who brought the map. And then comes Pope Leo XIV, the first US-born pope, criticizing the war and calling for peace while the White House fires back like somebody got heckled at a county fair dunk tank. Trump calling the Pope political is one of those moments where satire just sits down and says, I am going to let reality take this one. You have the president accusing the Pope of being weak on foreign policy, which is funny because popes are not usually expected to run amphibious operations between morning mass and lunch. Still, the clash matters because it shows how isolated the war debate is becoming, with moral, diplomatic, and military arguments all tangled together like extension cords in a barn. When your foreign policy has you feuding with Germany and a pope from America, that is not a coalition of the willing. That is Thanksgiving dinner after somebody brought up inheritance. Segment 6. Mayday, political violence, lithium, robots, UFOs, and the escape hatch. Back home, the pressure is coming out in every direction at once. Mayday protests brought labor rights, immigrant rights, and anti-war anger into the streets, which is what happens when rent, groceries, gas, and foreign policy all start climbing the same broken ladder. People are not just mad about one thing. They are mad in bulk, like Costco-sized civic anxiety. Add in the assassination attempt at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and now the national mood feels like a truck stop microwave with sparks coming out of it. The grounded observation is that political violence and mass unrest do not grow from nowhere. They grow in soil already soaked with fear, money pressure, and institutional distrust. And while all that is happening, we got a lithium rush colliding with tribal sovereignty, autonomous trucks delivering freight, satellites going up, UFO records being teased, and celebrities threatening to boycott the Met Gala over billionaire optics. That is the strangest part of this moment, because one half of America is arguing over war powers and voting rights, while the other half is solving word puzzles and asking whether aliens have better health insurance. The lithium story matters because green technology still has to come from somewhere, and too often somewhere means sacred land gets treated like a parts drawer. The robot truck story matters because automation might lower costs someday, but it also means another group of workers is staring at the future, like it just pulled into their driveway without asking. So the whole country is stuck between crisis and distraction, doom-scrolling through empire maintenance while hoping the next puzzle category is not things your government forgot to protect. In conclusion, today's news is basically America trying to juggle oil blockades, airline collapse, financial panic, voting rights chaos, alliance drama, religious criticism, street protests, political violence, resource fights, robot trucks, and UFO teasers while pretending this is a normal Tuesday with slightly higher gas prices. The big picture is not that one thing is broken. It is that every broken thing is now connected to every other broken thing by a rusty chain and a bill nobody wants to pay. War overseas shows up at the pump. The pump shows up in airline bankruptcies. Bankruptcies spook credit markets scare voters. Voters hit the streets. Courts rewrite the rules. And leaders argue with popes like this is somehow part of the job description. We are living through a news cycle that feels less like a newspaper and more like a warning label on a pressure cooker full of fireworks. And if there is one lesson from all of it, it is that when the world starts running like a busted tractor with no brakes, somebody better stop bragging about the paint job and start looking for the ditch.